Welcome to another video for my cloud series. We're going to go over in this video cloud networking concepts. So we're going to go over just a few things, segmentation in the cloud, services in the cloud, security, protocols to secure cloud traffic, and also hardening cloud-based resources. So I'm going to be creating a virtual network, a subnet in Microsoft Azure specifically, exploring the cloud shell as well as applying application security groups and application gateway as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So first, what I'm going to do is go over network segmentation in the cloud, and what network segmentation is. Right, it's a part of a layer defense system. Right, using network segmentation, um, we can add a layer of security to the resources within the cloud, right? And this is accomplished through various tools that Azure offers natively in its platform, from the configuration of virtual networks and various components associated with it. Now, we have many different options and security that we can apply to secure our resources, but it's important that now we can separate those resources out into different network segments. As different resources have various functions, right? It becomes imperative that their network connections pretty much maintain a segmented structure to reflect um, the separation of functionality. So what I want to do first is create a virtual network in Azure, right? And let me take a look here. So Azure Network is used to connect resources on the Azure platform naturally, right? Now, different cloud resources and devices can be connected to facilitate communication between these devices, such as connecting different Azure virtual machines on the same virtual network. So I'm just going to create the network, virtual network, and then assign a pool of IP addresses to the network. So just going ahead and getting started. So this is who I'm logged in under. So I'm just going to keep that resource group. All right. Let's see. I'm going to do cloud. Make sure I'm logged in correctly. Okay. UK South. That is perfect. Now, from the security tab, right, there's different security settings that can be disabled or enabled, right? So if there was the eye icon, for information versus opening a whole new tab to explain them, I mean, they're kind of self-explanatory through the small description that they have here, right? But nonetheless, I'm just gonna just make sure I add a firewall to my virtual network, right? And let's see, I don't want that to be the name. Practice lab firewall, right? And we're going to create a public address. And we're also going to name that, let's see here. That's not it. IP, right? And that's good. DDoS network protection. No, that's fine. We can just do that. So let me actually address here. Right, and I'm gonna show you something here. So as you can see, forward slash or backslash 24, 256 addresses, right? And now if I change it, now these are the number of addresses available. Now when I change it to 25, it's gonna actually decrease to 128 addresses, right? Just wanted to showcase that. So I'm gonna actually add another space, and then we're gonna do another IP. Go. For this one, we're going to keep that 24, right? NAT gateway. Now, in a real life scenario, right, we're going to, you would normally review the vendor documentation to ensure that they're not taking a portion of the pool and like reserving it for other infrastructure that we need to, or that I would need to attach to these networks. So let's run the validation, right? And it's pretty much, it may ask me to create, yeah, that's fine. And now it's going to run its deployment, which may take a while. The last few times I've done it, it took up to about 10, sometimes more than 10 minutes. So I'll place you guys on the other side of when the deployment is completed here. It's currently in progress. All right, so the deployment has, of course, succeeded. Everything I do succeed. So we can go ahead and move forward. Let me X out this. Let me X out the notifications. All right. Now let's take a look. As we can see here, um, cloud plus VNet. Now let's take a look at our setting. Let's take a look at the address space. Everything I've created is still here as far as the details. Now what I'm going to do is create a subnet in Azure. Now subnets typically need to be created when creating a virtual network. So these subnets are used to actually group related resources together. So let's see, and it allows in the subnet section for Azure, actually uh, it allows me to add names subnets for smaller segmentation. So if I want to, I can apply individual security controls to different subnets that I can create. So it's one of the things that network segmentation allows me the ability to do, or anyone the ability, right? Not only shortening up broadcast domains in a traditional sense, but more importantly here in the cloud. So this allows to add some security features to each different segment that allows us to control the security settings individually, right? And for compliance purposes as well. I'm going to create a subnet for the group, and I'm going to, for this group here, actually, no, might create another one. Let's see, create another one here. Go. I'm going to change this address range. I feel like I need to add some music to my videos. I'm not sure. Everything else, I think I'll leave it at the default. Actually, no, I need to. I'll save this here. It should not take as long as a deployment. Now, specific service endpoints, as I just configured, right, can be specified when creating a new virtual network. And this is just for securing network traffic on the network by specifying only allow traffic for the virtual network itself. So now I'm going to head back to the home link here. And now what I'm going to do is actually look at or focus on network services and the cloud security. Now, after initial creation of my virtual network here, I'm going to take a few more steps to control access to these connections. Now, going to explore the creation of subnets and some firewalls, right? So, in a simplistic explanation, right, subnets are primarily used to subdivide a range of IP addresses within a network, and this becomes useful when I may be attempting to separate resources by functionality and granted access. So firewalls, as we know from normal networking prior to cloud resources or services being available. Normal networking, right? It's just a list of rules that the network connections associated with the firewall must adhere to in order to allow or deny traffic. So leveraging the configuration of a firewall allows for more granular control of network connections, right? So I'm just going to configure the virtual network, right, that I already have. Since it's already created, it just needs to be configured to ensure that it meets the requirements for connecting specific resources and devices, right? So let's take a look at our resource groups first to start with. I'm already going to choose a pre-populated one here. And naturally, I'm going to choose my virtual network. Click on it. And let's take a look at the address space, right? And let's see, put this one here. We're going to add a new one. Okay, perfect, green check mark, and we're good. Let's save it. Now, since the virtual network was created, additional IP, as you can see, what I've just done, right? IP ranges can be added to the virtual network, and the addition might be needed, or it may be needed if virtual appliances are added, or like more network segmentation is needed typically. So let's take a look at our connected devices. Now, the devices connected to the virtual network are just shows us here with the specific IP addresses allocated to them for the pool of IP addresses assigned with the virtual network when the virtual network was created. Let's take a look at our subnets. Actually, going to add a new one. All right, and do web servers. So lets me type. Looks like my latency is getting a little bad. I'm going to change the range to what we been using. Okay, perfect. And for the services, I'm just going to use um, this one, Microsoft Web. And actually, let's see. Now, what this does is also just to touch on this really quick, it's just going to secure the network communication for this application. So everything else is good. So I'm just going to add that subnet. Shouldn't take too long. Perfect. So we're good here, right, with our web server. So let's take a look now at our firewall. Right, and we just going to configure this one. All right, so now we can see the details for the practice lab firewall that I created earlier. Let's see, let's take a look at the rules here. All right, and let's see, let's take a look at the network rule. I'm actually going to add one. Okay. All right, so we're going to name it RDP, and we're going to allow, well, I'm already rather 100. And for IP, I'm going to use, that's not the name, it's going to be RDP. I'm going to use TCP, transmission control address, right? Okay, destination. Okay, right. And we're going to use 3389. I'm going to add that one here, and I'm actually going to refresh, but actually it's updating. Now, this rule creation, sometimes it can take a little bit of a while to complete based off my personal experience. Now, a firewall rule has been created, let's actually refresh here, to allow remote desktop connection between the two specified IP addresses. Now, similarly, additional firewall rules can be added to secure network traffic that traverses across the Azure's virtual network. But nonetheless, as we can see, my PLAB RDP has been created, so I can head back home here. So now we can focus on, protocols to secure cloud traffic. Once this loads up here for me. Perfect. So now, because the Azure portal is, of course, first and foremost a GUI interface or graphic user interface, uh, it's the easiest interface tool to use when you start using the Azure cloud platform. I mean, to each his own. AWS isn't too bad. It's just fairly, to me, a bit more complex. It's a lot, a lot of different tools within that. But Azure can be challenging to perform complex or repetitive tasks using a GUI. Now, because of this, Azure also offers several command line options that make these kind of tasks easier to complete. The main command line environment naturally for Azure, because it's headed by Microsoft mostly, is Cloud Shell. And Cloud Shell is the interactive, authenticated, browser-based shell environment that anyone can use to deploy. Not anyone, but if you're within the confines of Azure, you can use to deploy, manage, and develop Azure resources. Now, one way to think of this is an interactive console that runs in the cloud. And I'm actually going to showcase this as well in just a moment. But there are a couple of different ways you can access the Cloud Shell. You can go to shell.azure.com, or you can, if you're already in Azure, you can actually get straight to it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to explore some use cases of Azure Cloud Shell by provisioning virtual machines. So now what Cloud Shell does, it runs on a, let's see here. All right, now what Cloud Shell does, it runs on, still updating. It shouldn't be. Keep an eye on that. But it runs on a temporary host that's provided on a per user basis or per session basis, right? And the shell times out after 20 minutes of inactivity normally, right? And it creates files for a couple different methods, creating a disk image for your home directory, and it allows all contents within the directory to persist, and it also mounts a specified file share, right? To let's take a look here. As cloud drive in your home directory as well. Now, when you first access it, As you can see, you're prompted to create an Azure storage account and Azure, file share and all of those things. Now, any data scripts that I place here would be maintained across sessions, and the storage account for each subscription is, of course, unique, which means I can keep the tools and data I need specific to each account that I would manage, right? So I'm just going to explore some features in the Cloud Shell here, right? So let's get started with the region. I want to make sure that it always stays in the UK, right? And let's see the storage accounts. It doesn't like uppercase letters, by the way. So I'm just keeping it as is. Create storage. Hopefully it doesn't give me an error message like it did last time. Then it should open up the shell, and the shell within the cloud of Azure, it looks exactly pretty much as it does for Windows, for the Windows OS. Nothing, relatively, everything's relatively the same. It's, as you can see here. Okay, come on, the latency. And you can also switch between Bash, I almost forgot to mention, and PowerShell. So you can actually, and it'll, confirm, and then, it'll start loading up here. Pressing a Cloud Shell, succeeded, blah, 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 blah. All right. So you can easily, again, switch back and forth. That's pretty much what I wanted to showcase. Right. So now I'm going to create a virtual machine with PowerShell. So now that we've opened it and we see how we would, how I would use this practically by creating the virtual machine, I'm going to see how I would create it using that from scratch, using PowerShell specifically. Right. So I'm going to type in a command. A command is pretty lengthy, so I'm going to place you guys on the other side of it. Then I'll break down exactly what portion of the commands. Actually, you know what? Since I'm going to do that, I'll kill two birds with one stone. All right. So as you can see, some of it showcases here. Right. So um, now new AZ or new availability zone virtual machine, right? Now, what this does is it just specifies that I'm looking to create an Azure virtual machine. And then for the next one, right, for the group name, it just specifies, which resource group this resource should be allocated. And let's see. And now name, this is going to be the name of the class. Is pretty straightforward. Let's see. Virtual machine. That's going to be the first one. Application. Okay. So now the location, which is pretty much means the availability zone that this resource will be assigned to. All right, and then let's see. And then subnet name, which is the name of the subnet for this virtual machine, which is going to be practice labs. And one, right? We have security group name. And this one is, self-explanatory, I would assume, right? It's just the name of the security group. It's going to be practice labs G01, right? And then we have our size, which is going to be, it allows me to set the size, the SKU size of the device. Right, so it's going to be standard. If you remember from a prior video I did, standard A1, B2. Okay, that looks good. Then public spell. Right, and that one is, make sure I spell it correctly. All right, that one is pretty self-explanatory, public IP. All right, and then I can explain this one. right? And this is just specifies which ports to open for this virtual machine. Then we lastly have image. It's going to be from Ubuntu LTS, which I've also selected from another one. Now the image is which OS or disk image I'd like the machine to have, and then I'm going to press enter. So that worked. Now there are some restrictions, and as far as the basic SKU size standard. I again mentioned this in the prior video. Now in a real life scenario, I would be able to use any specifications as necessary, depending, of course, on the budget for the business. And it's good to remember your specification has a different cost association to it. So let's actually go ahead and log in, right? And do that. Try to spell like everything correctly. Again, find the image. Okay. Let's see, why can't you find the image? Let's see, did I input it correctly? Let's see, LTS. Let's try it again. Usually it's the user error, but again, I still want to see. Still want to see what happens here. Let's fix that. All right, so gonna log in here. Give me just a second. Should be creating the new virtual machine. Take a moment to complete. And give me a PowerShell prompt. We'll see in a second. There it is. So the virtual machine has officially been created by PowerShell. As we can see here, right? Everything looks good to go. All right, so actually I can close this out now, and then we can take a look at a new virtual machine here. All right, perfect. And I'm actually going to click on the virtual machine that we've already created. And we can see the specifications of the pretty much of a new device down here. This is much more time efficient. It's much more time efficient process than creating via the graphic user interface. But I'm going to head back home here, and I can also create automation or automate creation of multiple machines at once, which can save a lot of hours of administrative effort using JSON. But nonetheless, we're going to move forward to our next exercise here. What I'm going to do is we're going to now, finally, I'm going to get into hardening cloud-based resources. Now, even as more resources are migrated to secure data centers in the cloud, right? Other vectors of attack still remain, right? So you can follow a few best security practices to help minimize vulnerabilities. You can process limiting potential weaknesses that make systems vulnerable to cyber attacks, like disabling unnecessary ports and services, disabling weak protocols and ciphers, firmware upgrades, controlling ingress and egress traffic, allow listing, or sometimes known as whitelisting or block list, right? Proxy servers, DDoS protection, and things of that nature. What I'm going to do now, as you can see, is I'm going to apply application security groups, right? So because managing network traffic helps create levels of segmentation between resources and add layers of security to the overall network. So the utilization of this application security group, right, is going to grant the ability to logically separate virtual machines that share the same network resources like subnets, right? So, so this is pretty quickly, actually, I'll be able to do this. So just set the name here. We'll be seeing this name quite often over the next few things I'll be doing here. And UK South, that's good. We can actually review it, validate, and then create, right? Perfect. So we're good to go, and the deployment should be fairly quick, usually. Yep, there it is. Go to resource. Perfect. Now I'm actually going to do two more for the application security groups. I'm not going to take you guys through that, so you don't have to go through exactly what I just did. It's super quick. And I'll show you guys what I come up with. This should be app servers and database servers. All right, so you can see now the app servers security group. Now I'm going to refresh. And now we see the DB servers as well for the third security group. So I have all three of these created. You'll see in a moment exactly why. So let's actually pivot back over to virtual machines here, right? And then let's take a look here, of course. Create it. All right, so now we have the overview here. So I'm going to take a look at our, um, let's see, our networking. Let's see. All right, perfect. And then I'm going to take a look at here. I'm looking for rules. Let's see. All right, so it looks like I'm going to configure the ASGs here, the security groups, and it should give me a populate here. Guess not. Let's see. There it is. I'll do the ASP, do add. Okay. Perfect. So we're good here. So then let me go back here. All right. Then take a look at our import inbound port roles. I'm going to add one, of course, from the security group. All right, and what this does is this is just going to associate traffic coming from resources configured with the application security groups. So, um, so now let's see, security group. Let's see. Do that here. Oh, that's good. All right, port ranges is fine. Any is good. All right, and what this does is, before I continue, what the asterisk does, this is pretty much a wildcard that notates any ports, like effectively applying the rule to any and all traffic that comes from resources from VMs that's configured with the ASP Web Services Application Security Group. Right, so nonetheless, let's see. And we're actually going to change this to 20. That's fine. And we're actually going to change this. Now, for a real life task for what I'm doing now, it's normally best practice to include more information about the reasoning here in a description field, though it can normally be determined what the rule does from reading the configuration selected. And there are instances when several sources or destinations might be included in a single rule, making it difficult sometimes to understand from just reading the configuration. But nonetheless, I'm going to add, once they allow me to, here. Thought I had what I needed. Okay. Let's see which one is missing. Yeah, one of them is missing. Let me go find it here. Currently, I'm able to add because I forgot to create an application security group. I went ahead and created it.
while not recording, because I already hashed through that, I created 2 additional instead of 3 additional, which was my fault, of course. But I went back and added it so I can have the proper configurations here. And now I can add, right? So now what I want to do lastly is configure the application gateway, right? So application gateway supports secure socket layer or transport socket layer termination at the gateway, after which traffic typically flows unencrypted to the backend server. So this feature actually allows web servers to be, let's say, unburdened from costing like encryption and decryption overhead, but sometimes unencrypted communication to the servers isn't an acceptable option. And this can be because of a typically security requirements or compliance requirements, or the application may only accept a secure connection. Now, for these applications, application gateway supports end-to-end SSL and TLS encryption. Now, traditionally, all right. Actually, let me get started here. Now, traditionally, load balancers were used to route traffic from external networks, as we know, into an enterprise's infrastructure. Now, Azure Application Gateways is a specialized web traffic load balancer that enables the management of traffic to web applications. So, with that being said, let me actually get started here. Actually, I like doing more than talking. You can believe that. All right. Now, application gateways, right? Um, they route traffic based on additional attributes in an HTTP request. So this type of routing is known as the application layer, or OSI layer 7. You want to go back to the OSI model, load balancing. And what I'm going to do now is actually provision an application gateway and configure its network conditions, right? So far, let's start with the resource group, of course, right? And the gateway name it is here. Okay, perfect. UK South. Just like this here. I'm actually going to create a new one, right? And let's see. Okay, actually, I want to capitalize that. There we go. All right, perfect. And before I actually continue, let me change this to 1. That's good. And then I want to create a new one for this one, 2. Now, I can enable, back to the last one actually before I continue. Um, I can enable a manage bot protection rule set to like take custom actions on requests from like known bot categories. And I'm referring to the checkbox that I had for the the PLAB web app FP from the custom actions on requests from known bot categories, right? So there are 3 bot categories supported, and they're usually bad, good, and unknown, and bot signatures are managed and dynamically updated by the WAF platform. So nonetheless, now we're going to create a virtual network and give it a name, right? And I'm going to leave everything else as is except the name here. There we go. Everything else looks pretty good. Right. Go to front end. Public is fine. Let's actually add a new web link here. Actually going to name that. Here. All right, perfect. And we're gonna add a backend here. I'm gonna name it. Okay, change this to yes. Perfect. Now we can go to configuration. We're gonna add a routing rule. Now, what I'm going to do here with adding the router rule is going to link the front end IP addresses to the backend pools that I just created. And external DNS entries will point to the front end connections, providing like let's say a level of separation from the internal resources. So it's actually name this here. Okay, priority. Actually, hundred listener. I think that's how you spell it. All right, perfect. Public is fine. Everything else is okay. And then let's see here. That's good. That's good. Actually, this. Yeah, let's take a look at everything else. Everything looks good. All right, now the configuration, right, for the backend. Um, there. All right, perfect. So the configuration for the backend setting, right, it's going to establish how the connection between the front end resources is going to communicate with the backend resources. Now, while it doesn't show here, or for anyone that's the user, these settings are the tunneling protocols that are leveraged. And without having the admin directly configure connection brokers, this replaces the server of Microsoft remote desktop services that would usually handle external connections. Now, someone may not be able to directly demonstrate layer 2 tunneling protocol, right? Like generic routing, encapsulation, and packet brokers, because these would be more related to switches and routers, right? And on a higher level, these configurations influence the configuration of uh, of those particular objectives. So just going to head on over to tags. And I believe that, yeah, that's it. Don't need any tags here. We're going to validation is passed, and now we can go ahead and deploy. All right. It should be finished up. I know the deployment for this one kind of takes a while. Let's see. All right, so the deployment is finally complete. So I'm going to go ahead to the resource group. And for the newly created PLab app GW, just going to go there. Then we're going to take a look at our listeners. All right. And then we're going to take a look at our change. Now, these relate to the HTTP protocols and the encryption and the authentication protocols it uses. So I'm just going to make a change here, redefine, which is it's going to be a pre-generated minimum protocol versions that will be used by the listeners. And I'm actually going to choose this one here. All right. So this is the minimum protocol. That's good. All right, perfect. And then I'm going to hit save. All right, so let's hit save. All right, perfect. So I should get a notification here saying that the changes have been made to the application gateway. They have been saved. Just a second. There we go. Perfecto. Love it. Love it. All right, perfect. And now that that's completed, we can head back home. Everything is configured. And that, ladies and gentlemen, overall is hardening cloud-based resources. And ultimately, as far as the last thing that we, I'm sorry, getting over a cold. The last thing we covered was particularly configuring the application gateway. And this also brings us to the end of the video. We've done a few great things, very fun. We went over cloud networking concepts overall, but particularly we went over network segmentation in the cloud, network secure services and cloud security protocol to secure cloud traffic. And lastly, but not least, hardening cloud-based resources. This was so much fun. Can't wait to get back into the lab again. On the next video, we cover securing cloud infrastructure resources. I'll see you guys there, hopefully. Until then, stay curious, stay secure.